Welcome to the Liminal Record. Grab some popcorn, grab a blanket, and let's get into it. My brother saw a ghost as a kid. 2 decades later, I realized what he actually saw. I was about 7 years old, my brother about 10. It was well past our bedtime when our mom woke up off the couch to put us to bed. Our dad worked construction out of town back then, so it was often just the three of us at the house for weeks at a time. Up the stairs and to the immediate right was our parents' bedroom. Going left put you in the middle of the hallway. Taking another left down that hallway led to my brother's room. The opposite end was my room, which was also across the hall from our upstairs bathroom. At either end of the hallway are open windowed doors we always kept locked and we rarely used. The door on my end led to a balcony overlooking our front yard, and the door on my brother's end opened to our back porch. The house kind of leans into a small hill. My brother and mom both had a bad habit of waking up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. I only knew this because I was always a light sleeper, and they just couldn't help flushing with the door wide open. This night, however, my brother stopped on his way to his room and came back towards the bathroom. I'm going to try to pee before I go to bed. The past few nights I've been too afraid to walk into the bathroom. I keep seeing a man wearing stripes at the end of the hallway. I don't know if my mom wrote it off as my brother telling ghost stories to try to scare me, or if she was already half asleep and didn't catch it. But she didn't react at all to my brother's confession. I, on the other hand, was terrified by it. The fear of seeing a ghost like that at the end of the hallway through the windows is the reason I started running from the stairs to my bedroom at night. Years later, when I was about 18, my mom and I were having a conversation in our car about a dog we had for a very short time when I was little. We were sharing stories about Max's tendency towards destroying my shoes and other unruly behaviors when my mom blurted out, "Do you remember that time I opened the door for the cops and Max ran inside to the kitchen and started tearing open that big bag of dog food we had?" This really caught me by surprise because in all the years I lived in that house, we never once called the cops. Gun owner family, in a quiet rural West Virginia neighborhood, etc. I asked her what she was talking about and she looked equally surprised as if she had just revealed something by accident. "Oh, that's right. I never told you because you were too young at the time. One night, I woke up hearing noises outside my window when I looked and saw a man staring into my bedroom." She went on how to describe turning on the lights caused him to take off running and how she grabbed my dad's pistol before calling the cops. I can't remember all the details I gave them when they showed up. Tall, white male, wearing a striped shirt and jeans, short dark hair, something like that. They said it matched the description of a man they were looking for in the area. It turns out he had escaped from jail on a murder charge. Now I know it sounds so obvious hearing these two stories back to back, but it wasn't until a few years ago, in my mid-20s, that I pieced together that my brother had unknowingly warned us about a murderer who spent multiple nights casing our home. Had an incredibly frightening experience last night and wanted to know if anyone here has ever had a similar encounter. So last night I was at a classmate's house working on a group project we have due tomorrow. I live in an apartment in the town where our university is located, and my classmate lives at his parents' house, which is in the foothills just outside of town. In order to get to the house, you have to drive along a relatively secluded and narrow 2-lane road for about 5 or 6 miles. We started working on the project at about 6 p.m., and I ended up hanging around for a while after we finished our working. So I left his house pretty late, about 11, and started down the road back towards town. I didn't realize how tough it would be to navigate the road at night. There were no streetlights and the road was unkept and riddled with potholes. On top of this, I had no cell service, so I had to drive very slowly to make sure I didn't blow out one of my tires since I'd used my spare a couple of weeks back. I figure I was about 3 miles from the house when I rounded a tight corner and saw a pickup truck with a camper shell parked diagonally across the road. The manner in which it was parked completely impeded my path and I couldn't drive around because there was a gully on both sides of the road. The only way for me to go at this point was backwards, where there was a pull-off that I could use to turn my car around. At first I couldn't see inside the cab, but when I turned on my high beams I saw that there was a man slouched over in the driver's seat, his head resting against the steering wheel as if he had been knocked out after a bad accident. I immediately sensed something was wrong. The way his car had just coincidentally come to a rest in that position that totally blocked the road was a big red flag for me. I had heard stories of people playing dead in the road as a way to lure unsuspecting people out of their cars so they could rob them. I decided, screw that, and elected to get back to my classmate's house and explain what was going on. I threw the car into reverse and I kept my eyes darting back and forth between my rear view and the truck. I looked and saw that I was almost to the pull-off where I could turn around. When I looked back, my heart skipped about 5 beats. The man who had been slouched over in the driver's seat was now walking at my car at a hurried pace, while a few other men jumped out of the camper shell and started moving towards me as well. I panicked and accelerated backwards into the pull-off, which messed up the undercarriage of my car pretty bad. As I put it into drive, the guy was already at my passenger door tugging on the handle, which, thank the Lord, was locked. I only caught a brief glimpse of him, but his face appeared to be scabbed and leathery. Definitely a meth head or some sort of drug abuser. I sped away and didn't slow down at all until I reached the house, constantly checking my rear view to see if they were following. Thankfully, they didn't tell me, and when I reached the house, I explained what happened to my classmate and we called the police. I was grateful that my buddy's parents were kind enough to let me stay the night. They didn't find anyone on the road matching the description, but I filed an incident report and they told me they would be on the lookout for similar vehicles and suspicious activity. Years of watching crime docs might have saved my life. For 6 months last year, I lived in the north of Spain. About a week before I was going to move back to Ireland, my friends and I were at my house having dinner and drinking a little. I was renting an apartment in the city and my roommate was an older lady, maybe in her 50s. I'm 20. That night, my roommate left to go have dinner with her friends. About a minute after she left, someone buzzed our door to be let into the building. I looked at the camera and didn't recognize the woman. She looked to be in her late 20s, early 30s, so I just assumed it was one of my roommate's friends and she was coming by to meet her or something like that. I buzzed her into the building, assuming they would meet in the lobby. At first, I didn't buzz her in because I didn't recognize her and she walked away from the door. But then I hit the buzzer as soon as she walked away and I, myself, walked away from the camera, meaning I couldn't see if she actually entered or not, assuming that if she didn't enter, she would just call or text my roommate. Boy, was I wrong. The woman came up to my apartment building on the 6th floor. She came up just 2 minutes after my roommate left, so I know she didn't take the stairs, and I know they must have seen each other when my roommate got off the lift and the lady got in. Realizing that this is weird, I do not open the door when she rings it. I look through the peephole just to confirm that it was nobody that I knew. At this point, I back away from the door and gesture for my friend to be silent. We creep back to my room, which is at the far side of the apartment, and I begin calling my roommate, who isn't picking up. Meanwhile, the lady is incessantly ringing my door. My roommate is not picking up, and my friend is telling me to just open the door. In her mind, it's a woman, so she must be harmless. I tell her she's an idiot to underestimate the female sex. Women can be criminals too. She keeps telling me to open the door, and I refuse. The door keeps ringing. I keep looking out the peephole. At this point, I understand that if she knew my roommate or was looking for someone specific, she would just call or text them. She didn't take out a phone at all. She just stayed eerily silent. She didn't call any names or ask if anyone was home. This was weird to me. I finally get through to my roommate. She said she wasn't expecting anyone and that she doesn't know anyone in that age range. She asks if I'm okay and I say I'm fine. Now it's been at least 20 minutes. I know the lady knows someone is home because the lights are on, and my understanding is that's why she's not leaving. I continue watching her through the peephole to see her go into the lift for a minute and then come back out again. The lift is really loud and I would have heard it move. It didn't. She just went in and came out. In my mind, this means someone is in the lift waiting for her. This screams sketchy to me. After about 40 minutes, she leaves. I run to our hall and flick on the outside camera. The lady left the building with 2 men. They all had backpacks on. I will eternally be grateful for trusting my instincts and not listening to my friend. Sometimes it's better to be safe than sorry. Creepy lady with henchmen? Let's not meet again. I just knew something was off. The police just left my home. A couple of months ago, while house sitting, dog sitting for my parents, I had an eerie feeling. As an obsessive ID channel watcher and a younger female, I played it off as paranoia. During these few days, whenever I took the dog out, he suddenly began sniffing areas he never sniffed before, particularly under each of our windows, and thankfully, it's because of him that I discovered 2 larger footprints under the window that looks directly into our living/dining room. Around the same time, about 2 months ago, I noticed a man walking up and down our street that I'd never seen in the entirety of my life, small Midwestern town. He also had, in my opinion, odd mannerisms. Prolonged eye contact, continued staring, and craning his neck as he walked by and never returned my smiles, hellos, or waves. Eventually, I became irritated due to how creeped out I was, both with him and the eerie feeling in general, and decided to wave. Upon no acknowledgement or turn, other than a cold stare, I got up and acted like I was going to follow him down the street, to which made him walk faster and turn a sudden corner. Never saw him again. Now today, I help my parents out by picking up their dog from the groomers, as it's right up the street in a safe suburban area. Oftentimes I don't walk while running errands in town. When I returned home with the dog, I had an unexplained horrible feeling the moment I walked in the door. Something, maybe a blanket, seemed misplaced. Something was off. I threw a little laundry on the basement and quickly stood up and looked around. No one there. Then I proceeded to the bathroom to check my makeup, and right when I look down to my left, there's feces in the toilet, with no toilet paper and not flushed. I've been the only one home all morning. I immediately throw back the shower curtain and start shaking. Adrenaline? And when nothing is there, I close the bathroom door and lock myself inside. I called dispatch. They arrived in less than 2 minutes. They searched the entire property, make me check my laptop to see if any recent search history isn't my own. Interesting. And check the fridge to see if food is missing. All valuables are accounted for. I know this isn't my feces. No one in my family would have a bowel movement and not use toilet paper or flush. I know someone's been here, yet because I love horror movies and the ID channel, they think I'm crazy. Hey dude, I now have my dad's knife. Let's not meet. I almost give a serial killer a car ride. So a little background here. My father was in the Army for 21 years, retired, and moved to a very small town in Central Florida. He got bored after a couple of years, and even though we didn't need money between his retirement and what my mom was making as a bookkeeper and tax prep, he wanted to go back to work. He started working at various gas stations, and it being a small town, the owners wouldn't care if I came there and helped him with stocking the coolers or even running the register, as long as I didn't sell any beer or smokes. This all took place in the late 80s, early 90s. The actual story I'm going to tell took place in 1990, and I remember the date well because it was shortly after my birthday, and being 15 in Florida, I had just gotten my learner's permit, and my dad would let me drive him to and from work just to get some experience on the road, both day and night. I was sitting in my usual spot at a table that was set up along the windows, book in hand, feet propped up and Mountain Dew on the table along with some snacks. I would generally spend most of the evening that way, reading books and getting up to run the register / stock the cooler at different times. I remember glancing up because something caught my attention that was unusual, and I realized that a lady was walking up our parking lot from the direction of the interstate. The gas station was right on I-85. This in itself was really strange, because where we were located, you don't get many people walking, and definitely not walking from the direction of the interstate. I figured she had broken down somewhere, and was coming to use the phone to call a tow truck or something. I was completely wrong. She came into the store, looked around for a few minutes, and I remember getting a strange and creepy feeling about her. She walked up to the counter and started telling my dad a story about how she had gotten stranded and needed a ride up to the next big town up north from us. Ocala was the town. This is important. My dad lets her know that he's working and there's no way that he can take her. She turns and looks at me, and while she's looking away from him, my dad catches my eye and suddenly shakes his head no. I was confused for a second, but then she turns back and my dad points at me, asking if I can take her. My dad responded back that I only had a learner's permit and wouldn't be able to drive her anywhere and then drive back. Normally I would have done it even though it was illegal, because I'd done it a few times before already. I didn't argue with my dad, since this was completely out of character for him. He was normally chatty with the customers, but for whatever reason he was almost curt and dismissive of her. Turns out he had a bad vibe about her from the minute he had seen her walking up the drive. Well, she cusses him for a minute, and he basically tells her to get out of the store. She slammed the door open. I thought the glass was going to break from how hard she slammed it, and then she stalks out of the store and down the driveway. I keep an eye on her and continue to watch as she makes her way back up the interstate and starts up northbound on a ramp. Almost a year passes and I'm in my bedroom, less than a week before my 16th birthday. I hear my dad yelling from the living room, "Son, get your ass in here and look at this." I quickly run to the living room and see my dad pointing at the TV and looking at the mug shot of the lady up on the screen. I immediately remember the lady who had been in the store. Turns out I almost gave a car ride to Eileen Wuornos, who was later convicted of being a serial murderer and then later put to death. I still have nightmares about what could have happened. I was almost kidnapped in Miami because of Instagram. My best friend is an influencer. Not big time, but with a big enough following to get free stuff, and she's gotten 2 sponsored trips. She still works a full-time job, but does the Instagram thing on the side mostly because of the perks. She's not big enough to live off this just yet. Anyway, this was her first trip. A little boutique hotel from Miami contacted her via Instagram and DMs and offered her an all-expenses-paid trip to Miami for Memorial Weekend in 2018, in exchange for her to be in the hotel and take pics and do a couple of stories. She was told she could bring a female friend with her if she wanted to, and everything would be covered for. This was her first time doing this, so at the time she wasn't really sure how it worked. They sent her a bogus contract for her to sign, and it said she'd be responsible for paying for her plane ticket to Miami, and that she'd be reimbursed for it later. This was to prevent a no-show, meaning the influencer gets the ticket purchased by the hotel and the influencer never shows up. It seemed reasonable. She invited me, a gay dude, instead of a female friend because she was nervous about the whole thing. We figured it wouldn't be a big deal, and worst case scenario, they don't want to pay for my plane ticket. She'd just cover it for me, and that's that. We were supposed to be picked up by the hotel at the airport, so the day comes, we arrive at Miami, and there's a guy holding a sign with her last name, and the paper has the hotel logo. We are greeted and we're escorted in a black SUV. Here's where it starts to get weird. As soon as we're going to get in the car, the driver is visibly upset. We thought he was talking to the guy who walked us over, but he was talking to my friend. He had a very thick accent and was wearing dark shades. He was telling my friend she was not allowed to bring her boyfriend, me, and that she said it was 2 girls, 2 girls. Hotel told me 2 girls. No, 1 guy, 2 girls. He was demanding to see where the other girl was. We were speechless and confused. The guy who walked us to the car looked annoyed, got in the passenger seat, and started to fight with the driver in Portuguese. It wasn't Spanish. And then he turns to us and asks where the other girl was at. My friend tells them, very upset by now, that there is no other girl, that she is at insert name, and that I'm just the friend coming with her on the trip. The big guy in the passenger seat gets out, tosses our luggage out of the car, and says something like, "This is some bullshit." Gets back in the car, and they take off. That was it. We were in shock, utter and complete shock. My friend immediately emails Melissa, the PR person who had been in contact through email with her, to tell her what happened. No response. We decide to take a cab and show up to the hotel. When we show up is when everything made sense. The hotel had been rebranded and had a completely different name, owner, and staff. We showed them the IG, and is indeed the IG of the hotel it used to be, but not the new one. They never contacted us. They never did anything. Whoever was in charge of the old IG account for the hotel did, or whoever got a hold of it did. Mind you, this was a somewhat big hotel account with about 10,000 followers. It was real, but upon further inspection we realized the pics were really old and so were the posts. My friend felt like an idiot and would not stop crying. We called the police, met up with a detective, but nothing ever came of it. They investigated who was running the account before, who had access to it. None of the people who used to run the account had anything to do with it. Nothing ever came out of this. It's upsetting and scary to know whoever wanted to abduct my friend or any other girls by using this old hotel Instagram knows who my friend is. The IG has since been deleted and we never heard anything from anyone ever again. But to think my friend would have been kidnapped had she gone with another girl instead of me sends chills down my spine. Be careful, and creepy hotel in South Beach. Let's not meet. At first I thought I was going crazy, but now I'm pretty sure someone has been entering my apartment while I'm at work. So this has been happening for about 1.5 years now. And tonight something happened that finally made me and my boyfriend realize that I wasn't imagining things. About 1.5 years ago, after living in my apartment for over 5 years, I all of a sudden started noticing that things would be out of place when I would get home from work. Things that almost seemed out of place on purpose to mess with my OCD. Sometimes I would notice knives that were put back into the knife block the wrong way, or little ornaments that I have lying around my house being turned to face the wrong way. Sometimes my clothes were hung up in my closet the wrong way. Little things like that where I would feel like something was off, but there was no way to prove it. And in all honesty, it could have just been me being absent-minded when putting things away. After a couple of months of things randomly being out of place and always having that creeped out feeling, things stopped going out of place, and I put it to the back of my mind and stopped being so paranoid and moved on with my life. That is until about 2 weeks ago. For the past couple of weeks, my cat has been seriously trying to tell me something when I've gotten home from work. Any of you that have a cat will know that exact meow. It's not an I'm hungry or I'm pissed because you've been at work all day meow, but oh my god, you won't believe what happened meow. If that makes sense. I didn't really think anything of it because cats can be jerks sometimes, and I just assumed he was just bored and wanting to complain. The other day when I came home from work, though, I noticed a pair of balled up socks that do not belong to me sitting on my bedroom floor. My boyfriend came over the next night and I told him he had left a pair of his socks here when he had stayed over on the weekend. He looked at the socks and said that they were not his. My heart sunk, and so did his. We both knew that someone had been coming into my house again, and that I probably wasn't imagining it the first time. A few days later, I came home from work and found a bag from a lingerie store on top of my couch. It was empty. The bag had come from inside my house, as I had just bought a bathing suit from that store a few weeks prior, and the receipt for it was in the bag. At first I thought my cat may have dragged it in there, but upon inspecting the bag there were no teeth marks, as well as my cat couldn't have opened my closet door and gone into the paper/cardboard recycling that I keep in there on the top shelf. The final and perhaps most unsettling thing happened tonight. My boyfriend met me after work and we went out for dinner. We went back to my apartment after, and I went to unlock my door and noticed that it was already unlocked. Locking the door when I leave my house is the one thing that I'm the most OCD about. I don't just double and triple check it, I quadruple check it. It's not just a habit I have, but it's something that is deeply ingrained into me. Anyone who knows me knows this about me, as I even do it to their doors. I have to check 4 times or I get an icky feeling. Even my boyfriend was on red alert when he noticed my door was unlocked. We entered my house and was checking to see if anything was out of place. He ran to the sliding glass door and tugged it, and it opened right up. I never leave that door unlocked. He witnessed me lock it on Sunday when I closed the door because it was getting too cold. He saw me check it 4 times. I have not opened it since then. We're both convinced that someone has been in my house. Whoever has been coming in somehow has a key. The fact that they left the sliding door unlocked makes me think that maybe they're planning to come back with ill intentions. If they have a key, why would they need to unlock the sliding door, unless they don't want to be identified by the cameras at the front of my building? Either way, I've already ordered a security system, but unfortunately it's not going to arrive for a few days. Any suggestions on anything I can do in the meantime to keep safe? Also, what do you think? Am I just being paranoid, or should I go with my gut on this one? I wish it was my drunk roommates eating my food. This is my brother's girlfriend's story. She doesn't have a Reddit, but I told her about this subreddit, and she wanted to share her story because it's creepy, but it's also to learn from. I go to a school in a big city that's one of the least safe in the US. I chose the school for nursing and definitely not for the location. I live in a row of houses off campus with 4 other girls, cheaper and nicer than dorms, or so we thought. I guess you get what you pay for. We are all girls and sophomores in college. As you would guess, we go out and drink, come back and do things we don't remember. We had just started our rent in August. 3 floors, plus a basement which was padlocked by the owners. Understandable, we would definitely have parties down there to avoid immediate cleanup. The house was great, an amazing location to the school and work. A CNA who works odd hours, important for later. It was not expensive, it was in good condition. I've never lived with that many people before, just one roommate, so before we definitely knew if one of us had misplaced or changed something. I started to notice my snacks were either half gone or completely gone. I was getting annoyed, but a house of that many people, it's too much work to go figure out who ate it, so I ignored it. Slowly, as girls do, we started making comments about someone eating our food, but passive-aggressively, college girls. We all just let it go because who wants a whole house fight? I work until about 11 in the NICU. I get home around 11:30, mostly on weeknights. I started to notice pans left out, or snack wrappers lying around. I thought it was odd because one of my roommates had done that before, and just thought they probably drank a bottle of wine and then went to bed and forgot about it. Again, my roommates start making comments. This time we started to ask because it was getting annoying, all of our food being gone and things being left. I know it was one of them, but who wants to admit they ate someone else's snacks in college? Snacks are a high commodity. We chalked it up to the girl who always smokes and eats her weight in food. She swore it wasn't her. This went on for about 2 months. It got more obvious someone was clearly taking everyone's food. Definitely the girl that always smokes. I've seen her eat an entire snack pantry in a night. I wish it was her. One night at work I was about to get off, but a situation happened and I didn't end up leaving until about 12:30. I took the bus home. I carried pepper spray, a taser, and a pocket knife. I got home and I was about to collapse. I wanted to go to bed ASAP. I walked in the front door and the stairs are directly in front of you. You can also see down the side into the kitchen. I walked in and saw someone in the kitchen, but I was too tired to say hi, thinking it could end in a 30-minute conversation about nothing, so I just went straight upstairs. When I got to the second floor, I noticed all my roommates' doors were closed, which always means they're all either in their room for the night or asleep. I got a weird feeling, just something made it click. They were all asleep, right? I texted our house group chat asking if anyone was in the kitchen. I felt stupid for even asking. 2 responded no, and the other 2 said they had been asleep. I knew it wasn't any of my roommates down there at that moment. I dialed 911, but I didn't press call. I crept into my roommate's room across the hall, thankfully, or maybe not thankfully. She didn't have her door locked. I whispered, telling her I think someone is in the house. She gave me the widest eyes ever and almost looked like she was going to cry. She didn't suspect anything like I had, but for reference, we were in a very bad area, as in there was a shooting in the house 2 doors down only weeks earlier by the intruder. She mouthed to make the call. The whole time we were dead silent, and we didn't hear anything really at all. I was starting to think I was seeing things after such a long day at work, and I was regretting that I had dialed, thinking I'm going to look like an idiot when they show up and I was just overtired and dreaming. We explained what's going on, and they said they'll send someone as soon as possible, and that actually does mean right away since it's a big and dangerous city. The police showed up and I didn't even want to go downstairs, but the operator confirmed it was them, so I did. But the whole time I could swear the operator could hear my heart beating. The police came in and looked around. I'm thinking, I look so dumb. They asked if there were any other floors. We'd tell them technically the basement, but it's padlocked, so really no. They checked the basement just in case, and, well, yeah, they were right. A man had been living in the padlocked basement. Block was pulled off the hinges and just kind of propped up against the wall. We never looked at that though, because we rarely went out back. The guy had taken a comforter off of one of my roommates out of the hall closet, had a mattress from God knows where, and his clothes, well, he was the one moving and eating all of our stuff. He would come out in the middle of the night and do it. He started getting more comfortable. I don't know if he was drugged out and forgot to clean his tracks, or if he just didn't really care. Me and my roommates have pretty consistent schedules during the week, probably letting him think that any time after 12 was good to come out. We never slept with our individual doors locked, and that's what freaks me out the most. He had access to any one of us at any moment, and we had no idea. When he was getting arrested, I was the only one to go down and look. I don't know why I did. I wish I didn't. I took a picture in the process of him being arrested to show my roommates who were too afraid to go down. This is him. So yeah, let's never actually meet, dude. Something's off with the new guy. I was reading a story that reminded me of an event from over 20 years ago. The second half of 1998, I had taken a job as a security guard at a plant that made locks. Being a kid, I usually worked one of 3 shifts. 4 to 12 a.m., 7:30 to 3:30 a.m., or 12 a.m. to 8 a.m. The 7:30 to 3:30 shift was for extra coverage, so there were always 2 of us there from 7:30 to midnight. It was a routine, boring job for the most part. We did our rounds, logged anything out of the ordinary, and watched a tiny monitor displaying the CCTV feed. Things went by in an almost painfully normal manner for 6 months. I worked, saved, bought a car, and planned to move. By late March of '99, I served my notice and prepared to head cross country. A new hire was brought in to fill my spot, a soft-spoken man named Calvin. As part of his training, Calvin spent time working all hours. At night he was a shadow, working with myself and the other night guard, getting a feel for the plant's nocturnal routines. Most nights he worked with myself and Amira, a female guard who was around my age. I was 18 at the time. Calvin, who was about a decade older, was quiet, he was polite, though something seemed to be missing. There's a spark that genuinely nice people seem to have, and he did not possess it. Whenever he went on rounds with me, he'd ask questions about the job and make small talk. I noticed that he was a little odd, laughing at odd times and changing his tone mid-sentence. At the time, I chalked it up to him being awkward. That wouldn't last. One night near the end of his first week, he went on rounds with Amira. When they returned to the office, I knew something was wrong. Normally talkative, she would barely say a word. Not sure what had occurred. I waited until Calvin had gone to the restroom to ask. During their trip, everything had been normal until they reached the brass mill, a portion of the plant that shut down at 6 p.m. There were usually no employees there after that time and no lights. They were making their way to a checkpoint on a landing on top of the flight of stairs when the mood shifted. She told me that she turned around only to find that he was right on her, Startled, she backed against the grating at the end of the landing, and he leaned in towards her, his face nearly touching hers. He flirted in a low voice, and when she mentioned his wedding band, he said it would be over soon. From then on, I did the rounds, taking Calvin with me each time. The night ended without further incident, and I left a note for our supervisor detailing what had occurred. The next night came and went with no Calvin. I did the rounds while Amira stayed locked in the office. Same thing the night after. Then on my second to last shift, I come in to find her freaking out. She found out why Calvin hadn't been to work. He had been arrested for murdering his wife. She had been dismembered and burned, parts of her body placed in a pond less than a mile from where we worked. That night and the next, Amira called the jail just to make sure they were still holding him. Based on the time frame, he had killed his wife months before he started the job. Some woman stood in my flat, right next to the shower curtain. This happened a few years ago in my old one-person flat. I had a strange feeling that something wasn't right for a few days, like I was sure that the food in the fridge was less than I put back the last time. I found pillows on my couch on the floor, stuff like that. I lived alone back then, so there wasn't anyone else with access to my flat. Or so I thought. One night I woke up around 1 a.m, sweating, and even though I didn't remember, I was sure I woke up from a nightmare. Since I was drenched in sweat, I decided to take a shower. So I put my phone up in the bathroom for music, turned on the water, and enjoyed my shower. A few minutes in, I heard the door move. I never close it, but it still never moves. I took a look at the shower curtain and saw a shadow against it. And to look at my phone confirmed someone was there, since I could clearly see a reflection in my screen that showed someone standing next to the shower curtain. It took a lot not to scream and to keep acting like I didn't notice anything, while silently taking the shower head off and holding the water all the way to hot. I'm still kind of impressed of that quick thinking. Our water got really hot when it was cranked all the way to hot, and a few seconds later steam was raising and the water hurt my feet flowing into the drain. I turned around, ripped the shower curtain open, and held the head right at the person behind. It was a woman. She screamed in pain. I whacked her in the face with the shower head and jumped out of the shower and ran to the door, taking the key out of the lock and locking it close behind me. A little later, she started to bang on the door, but the door didn't give. Thank God for quality German work. I called the cops and went to the kitchen to get my big kitchen knife, just for safety. I felt like my throat was closing up when I saw it missing and realized there's only one place it could possibly be right now. The police came and arrested the woman, who turned out to have been the former person living in the flat and was evicted for not paying rent. Seems she made a copy of the key and came into the flat when I was at work, and sometimes at night. It's possible that's what woke me up in the first place was her, and honestly, I don't even want to think about it. Ever since then, I always insist that the locks are changed when I move into a new place. Since a lot of people ask, I found the knife later in the bathroom, so she definitely brought it with her, and either the police disarmed her, or she dropped it herself at some point. But honey, I am your mom. I don't remember how old I was, just that I was small enough to fit in the front baby seat of a grocery cart. That would put us in the very late 90s, early 2000s. I was grocery shopping with my mom at a Costco. For those who don't know the chain, it's basically a huge warehouse where everything is sold in bulk. Food, clothes, books. It's basically a Walmart, but if Walmart sold cereal boxes in counts of 3s or frozen dinners by the dozen. My mom has a bad habit of pulling her grocery cart down to one side of the aisle in the stores, and then walking the lengths of the shelves, picking up what she wants, and then coming back to the cart and dumping what she has in the basket. I don't get why she does it, but hey, moms do weird things. So I'm maybe 4 or 5, sitting in the front basket playing with my Game Boy Color, when she pulls over next to a fruit display in Costco and tells me she's going to look at the different deals and to sit tight. I wasn't a very fidgety kid, so I said no problem. She's gone for a couple of minutes. I'm absorbed in Pokemon, so I don't really notice her walking up until the cart starts moving. Being a kid, I instinctively trust she's the one pushing the cart. I was wrong. After a moment or two, I catch out of the corner of my vision her red nails. That's a problem because my mom never paints her nails and never, ever wears them long. I look up. The lady pushing the cart is a little older than my mother. Same curly black hair, but pulled into a ponytail at the nape of her neck. I still remember she had tanned, Italian-type skin with thick red lips, a heavy coat of eyeliner, and brown eyes. She was pretty skinny. Her teeth were yellowed and she smelled like what I didn't realize until later. Bad BO. This wasn't my mom. and I said so, very loudly. She laughed and looked around and pushed the cart a little faster. I said it again, and she looked me dead in the eyes and said, and I'm paraphrasing here because I don't remember the exact wording, "Oh, sweetie, what game are you playing? I am your mom." So the way the Costco is set up, at least ours, is that in the produce area, instead of aisles, they're more like islands. They're large square setups that you can see the entire length of the produce section if you walk in that area. So of course, I can see my actual mother a few displays away. As loud as I could, I remember yelling, "Mom," and watched her head whip around to look at me, right as this lady is trying to cover my mouth with her hand. I don't know if she decided then I wasn't worth it because I was so noisy, or if looking at my mother charging from a few displays over. A side note, my mom is not a petite woman. She's built like a linebacker, and she played roller derby and softball throughout college, up until I was about 10. She's more of an ox than a human woman, but that's what I appreciate about her. But anyway, the woman squeezed her hand around my little face once and then booked it. My mom comes running up to me, and she starts asking me a million questions at once. My little brain thinks all of a sudden that I'm in trouble for using my outdoor voice inside, because she looks mad, so I start to cry. By the time she calmed me down, the lady was already gone, and reporting her to the head of security did bupkis. The store never found her inside, and security cam footage showed her leaving, but not with anyone else. Don't know why she picked me, or what it would have been for, but I'm just glad my real mom ended up scaring her away, and that nothing became of it. So to the lady who tried to kidnap me from the Costco produce section claiming to be my mother, let's not meet again. A strange man hunted me through a national park. I was camping in the middle of nowhere in Washington near Mount Rainier. Like, not an official campground, just way out in the forest where I wouldn't have expected another human for miles. One night I wake up and I hear something. I open my tent, and there's a guy sitting by where the fire had been right outside of my tent. Nothing particularly noteworthy about the guy, just a fairly regular-looking dude just sitting there, a couple of feet from my tent. No bag or pack or anything with him, just a guy. He saw me open the tent. His eyes got huge like I had just seen a ghost, and he took off. It shook me up pretty badly, but over the next day I managed to put it out of my mind fairly well, after writing it off as just some odd occurrence, and a guy that was probably high or something, and he had somehow managed to set up camp coincidentally not that far from mine. Then 2 days after that, and about 10 to 15 miles away, in totally random directions that nobody could take the same path as an accident, I was sitting by the fire that night and started hearing noises that I got more and more convinced were a person. I called out to them, and out of the darkness came something like, "Do you know how to get to Bell's Canyon?" I said no. I don't even think that's a real place there. They kept walking from just outside of my line of vision. I tried to see them with my flashlight, but they yelled, "Aim that away." And I was kind of spooked, not wanting to piss off a potentially crazy person, so I did. After like 15 minutes of me being very freaked out, and them talking and asking completely random questions from the darkness, it sounded like the voice had gotten closer, so I shone my light that way again, and it was the same dude who had been sitting outside of my tent 2 nights before. He had to have followed me almost 15 miles over 2 days, because there's no way he could have just accidentally wound up in the same spot, as vast as that wilderness is. No possible way. As soon as my light hit him, he took off again. I started to chase him, but I didn't want to get lost in the wilderness in the dark, so I stopped quickly after probably only 100 or 200 foot. This one couldn't be written off, because the only way he could have been in both places is specifically if he was following me. I decided the trip was over first thing in the morning, and hiked back out over 3 days, constantly doubling back, trying to throw anyone off of following my trail, and occasionally hiding and waiting to see if he would come by following me. I really can't describe how terrifying it was to feel like I was being hunted through the woods, and to actually have to brainstorm on things I could do to best avoid potentially being murdered. On the first night hiking out, twice I heard what sounded like a person walking in circles outside of my tent, but by the time I mustered the courage to look, nobody was there. On the second night, I heard what I thought was an animal making noises at first in the distance, but slowly decided sounded more like a human making animal calls. But it could have actually been an animal. I didn't actually see the guy again, but it really sounded like a person making howling noises. I literally almost cried when I finally got back to the car. The relief was so strong. To this day, probably the most terrifying experience I've ever had. I have no idea who the guy was or what his intentions were, and no way of getting an explanation. But I really can't articulate just what a terrifying few days it was. I was going to help you. So this literally happened about 30 minutes ago. I'm driving to work and it's about 3:30 a.m. I take 3 different routes to work, but I've been taking the same one for a while since there's construction everywhere else. I'm driving down this road and on the other side of the road is all subdivisions. I'm listening to a podcast, trying to keep myself awake until I can go get some coffee. I start getting this uneasy feeling in my stomach, but I thought it was my body telling me to get some caffeine and maybe something to eat. I ignore it and continue driving. All of a sudden, this guy starts running out in the middle of the road. I barely see him since he's wearing dark clothes. I managed to slow down and I noticed he looked pretty freaked out. Now, I listen to a lot of creepy podcasts, ranging from true crime to supernatural. I know the rules to stay safe in situations. I wish I listened to them today. I normally wouldn't stop, but I knew that if something happened to me, I would want someone to stop. So I did. Luckily, I kept my car running and I rolled down my window a little bit just so I can talk to the guy. I asked him if he was okay and he started freaking out, saying someone was trying to kill him. He told me his dog was ripped apart in his front lawn and he tried to pick the remains up to bury it, and he saw a man running after him with a knife. He said he thought it was probably a coyote or something, so he wasn't suspicious, but he ran off when he saw the man. Now, I was pretty freaked out, but I noticed something. Yeah, it was dark, but with the lights on inside my car and the lights that were on out in front of the subdivisions, I could see pretty well. He was younger, about mid-30s, dark black hair, green eyes. He was wearing a hunter's jacket and jeans. I live in Idaho, so hunter's jacket is pretty normal attire. What I noticed, however, is there was no blood or fur anywhere on him. I asked him why there wasn't any blood on him, and his whole demeanor changed. It was like turning off the switch. My blood went cold. He stared at me for what felt like hours, but it was probably only a couple of seconds. What came out of his mouth next was the final straw for me. His whole body relaxed, he stopped shaking, and he leaned closer toward my window and smiled at me. It was a twisted type of smile, and his eyes went dark. He took a deep breath and said, "I was going to help you." He then started cackling and tried to open my car door, and I immediately rolled up the window, put my car in drive, and sped off down the road, not stopping for anything. Once I finally got to work, I started crying. I still have 10 minutes before I have to go in, and honestly, I'm terrified to get out of my car. To the guy that wanted to help me, let's not ever meet again. Someone always rings my doorbell at exactly 11:05 p.m. Since almost a year now, end of August 2019 to be exact, I've moved to an apartment in a different city because my mother, who I lived with in my hometown, passed away from cancer. I've moved here with my long-term boyfriend and one other roommate, who's been a good friend to both of us since before we had even started dating. We all absolutely love it here. The location is great. It's a 15-minute bike ride from my university, and it's located at a square with a grocery store, drugstore, lunchrooms, etc. So we pretty much have everything we could possibly need to survive within walking distance. However, after just a month or two of living here, someone has started to ring my doorbell at exactly 11:05 p.m. semi-regularly. Sometimes every day, sometimes every other day. Sometimes there's a week in between, and sometimes there are a couple of weeks in between. But it's always around 11:05 p.m. And every single time, I get no answer each time I ask through the intercom who it is. Except for one time, but we'll get to that in a bit. At first I thought it was friends from one of the neighbors who accidentally rang the wrong doorbell. But after around the 4th time I grew suspicious. And after more than those 4 times I started noticing that it always happens at either exactly 11:05 p.m. or a few minutes earlier or later. My boyfriend and roommate both work at bars, so they both work until very late and would usually only get home around 2 a.m. So each time it happened, I was always alone at home, and it started to really freak me out after a while. When I first told them about it, they kind of shrugged it off and said it was probably a wrong dial, like I thought at first. But when I told them that it has happened so many times, and sometimes even daily, they didn't really believe me and thought I was just being paranoid and spooked. However, one night, when the doorbell rang again, I answered the intercom asking who it was. I heard very heavy breathing. I was thoroughly spooked at the moment. I was again home alone and kept asking who they were and what they wanted. I couldn't make out from the breathing if it was a man or a woman, but I heard strange mumbling or whispering, and then it was dead silent, and then they appeared to have left. I had put my apartment door on a double lock after that. I was so scared and spooked out. Thankfully, my roommate got home a little earlier that night, around 30 minutes after the doorbell rang, and he could tell how upset I was. Now with the corona crisis, my roommate and boyfriend aren't able to work anymore, and now they also witness the frequent door ringing at 11:05, so they now do believe me and agree that it's very odd and creepy. We have a balcony that looks down at where our apartment building's main door is, but because there's also a shop right underneath us that always has those curtain roof things on it, the view to the door is partially obscured. Every time our doorbell rang, me, my boyfriend, and roommate would go to the balcony to see if we could see anyone, but we never could. I've also asked my neighbors from my apartment building if their doorbell also gets rung so often, but the ones that I asked all said that it has never happened to them. So 2 weeks ago, my roommate decided to do some investigating and went outside of our apartment building at 11 p.m., standing across the street and pretend to have a smoke while keeping an eye on the door. He said he did see a man who looked kind of suspicious wandering around our apartment building, who slowed down his pace significantly as soon as he approached our door. But when he spotted my roommate looking at him, he quickly walked away. We aren't 100% sure if it's the door ringer, but that was very suspicious. Our doorbell hasn't been ringing at night since that day, and I'm hoping that maybe it will stop now, but there's a possibility that it will continue again in a few weeks. So, strange man who rings my doorbell at 11:05 at night so often, please stop, and let's please never meet. I might have saved a woman and her daughter from a nasty encounter in the Australian mountains. This happened about 4 years ago. Some backstory. I'm from Australia and lived there during this event. At the time, my girlfriend, now wife, lived in another country, but was visiting me over Christmas break. I lived in a big city, which if you drove about an hour in any direction, would either lead to another city or beautiful nature. My friends and I decided to take my girlfriend at the time to see some of this beautiful nature, and we decided on a national park about an hour and a half from where we live. The place is definitely no sort of secret location. It's very well known, but there are a ton of different areas to it, all with different rural and windy roads taking you to various areas of the park. We'd gone in 2 different cars, my friends in one, my girlfriend and I in another, to have some time together. We finished out the day of hiking and we were heading home down one of those less common roads. I remember seeing this really beat up old 70s sedan with a wild looking dude in the driver's seat drive past us in the other direction. This wasn't uncommon as there are a lot of smaller, less economically sound towns spattered around the area, but for some reason him and his car stood out, and my girlfriend noticed it as well. About 200 meters further down the very windy road, there was a pull-off area, just a semicircle of gravel you could pull off to look at the view towards the ocean. There was a camper van belonging to a company that mostly rented out colorful vans to backpackers parked there with a woman standing in front of it. As soon as she sees us, she jumps out onto the road to flag us down. Now, I've read enough of these subs know pulling in to help her on a quiet road might not be the safest idea, but back then I hadn't, and my friends were in the car directly behind us. Luckily, she wasn't the person I didn't want to meet. She was quite obviously upset and scared when we pulled in. I told my girlfriend to wait in the car, and I got out to speak to her. She was almost in tears. I can't remember where she was from, but it was Central European from memory. Touring around with her 4 or 5-year-old daughter. She told me her van had broken down, and she'd pulled off there and called a van company's assistance line when she was waiting for help. By this time, my friends had pulled in behind us, and a couple of them had come over to see what was up. Apparently, a scary man had driven past her a few times already. First time pulling over to offer to take her and her daughter to the nearest town for help. She had thanked him and said no, that she was waiting for the assistance vehicle. He left, but then he kept driving past every 10 to 15 minutes in opposite directions, slowing down, looking at them, driving off. She begged us to stay with her while she waited for the assistance vehicle because this guy terrified her and her daughter. We agreed. My friends, being the awesome people they are, decided me and my girlfriend were enough and they ditched us. Thanks, guys. We stayed with the woman for a little while before the car that my girlfriend and I had seen earlier drove past kind of slow, coming the opposite way we'd seen him the first time. As soon as he'd driven around the bend, the lady told us that was the scary man she'd seen before we got there. This got my girlfriend and I to take her much more seriously after the feeling we got from the guy just seeing him on the road. A few minutes later, he came back from the other direction and pulled into the parking area. Some more context. I'm not an intimidating man. I'm tallish, but I have almost zero muscle and fairly soft features. So there's not at all intimidating me, a terrified foreign woman, her tiny daughter, my girlfriend who doesn't look that intimidating, but is tough as nails, parked off a quiet road in a rural location with a not so nice looking dude pulling into where we were. Great. He gets out and is redneck as hell and definitely not friendly looking. No judgment on the redneck part. I come from a poor country town north of the city and those are my people, but hopefully it sets a picture. He strolls over to us. At this point I walk towards him to put myself between the girls and him. I have no idea where this bravery came from. I would definitely not describe myself as a brave person normally. He looks at the girls, then me, and asks if he can help. I tell him no, we're just waiting for the assistance vehicle, and tell him that we've got it covered. He says then maybe he could stay and wait with the woman and her daughter so we don't have to. I tell him we're happy to stay and thank him again, but we've got it covered. He kinda just stood there for a while staring at all of us, not really saying anything, giving off mega creepy vibes. After what seemed like forever, another car drove past us and looked but kept going. That seemed to startle him. He mumbled good luck and got in his car and drove off. We waited with this poor scared woman and her daughter for almost 90 minutes. Ended up talking a lot and hopefully we had made our opinions of Australians a little brighter after Mega Creep, who drove past once more after about 15 minutes after he'd left us. Finally, the assistance vehicle arrived. A bigger dude who could definitely handle himself. I asked to see his ID and stuff to be safe, but he was in a car marked by the company, had all of his tools, and definitely seemed legit. We gave the lady my number and asked her to text me when she was off safe. She was so grateful to us for staying with her for such a long time. It made me feel good that even if this dude was just a weird-looking, awkward country guy that didn't mean harm and really was just trying to help, we had still made her feel more comfortable in a strange country. I don't think he was, and definitely believe he was up to no good, but you never know. I did get a message from her to say she was safe, so everything ended well. But creepy mountain dude, let's not meet again. That time I dodged human traffickers in Texas. So 2 summers ago I'm cycling to a smoke shop. It's kind of out of my way, in a not great neighborhood, but I'm fairly confident. It's daylight. I ride all over the city and I know the store. I was 24, short, had short pink hair, but I always considered myself too intimidating to kidnap. I forget that even if I am a veteran, I'm also a short white girl. I pull up to a crosswalk and I'm waiting for a light when 2 Hispanic guys start catcalling me from a windowless white van. No identification, no stickers. Even the way they yelled at me was weird. It wasn't the typical, nice tits, locker room BS. They would talk to each other and then yell through a cracked window about how we're gonna get you. You're next. It felt off like they were excited, but I just flipped them off and rode away. End of story, right? Over a mile later, I'm right around the block from my destination. To set it up, there was a massive empty lot, really more like 2 lots, on my right. That was the side I was riding down. To my left, there's the back fence of a very old and probably abandoned house. It was like that all around, mostly drifters or old people in poverty. A few trap houses. The point is there was no one else visible, and even if they had seen this, they wouldn't have said anything for their own safety. I'm pedaling along when the album ends and I think, I'm almost there. I'm not going to stop and fumble with my phone. That saved my life. As I'm thinking this, a white van pulls up on my left and stays right inside my peripheral. They revved the engine a few times and tried to spook me, but something told me not to move. Don't let them know you know. So I acted like my music was playing and pedaled a little faster. Up ahead of me was a brick wall to my left, and a tall tree over it before a quick alley entrance. Suddenly, they punch the gas and pull up in front of me, stopping next by the brick wall. They were trying to corner or funnel me, putting me in a position where I had to ride between their door and the wall. This all happened in the span of maybe 7 seconds. I honestly didn't feel panic. I didn't actively register any fear or sweat or anything. It was like someone much calmer took over my body and said, "Nope." I remember instantly crossing the street without even thinking about the movements or why. As I pedaled up to their side, I realized that it was the van from before, and now it has a window repair magnet on the side. It's too small to look good and has absolutely no contact info, just a generic name. I kept rubbernecking and see that there was no one in front, but there was movement inside the seats. The guys were in the back by the door. They had planned to literally drag me off my bike, off the street, and do God knows what to me. Once I was past, they scrambled into the front seat and pulled out so hard they burnt rubber. I got to the store safe, but I still hate myself for not taking the plate number. Not that it would do any good, they probably switched them out later. I knew I had been almost kidnapped and killed or worse, but it wasn't until I told the story to someone from Mexico that I found out it was traffickers. They said it sounded sadly familiar, and it happens all the time. I have no family, and my roommates are just roommates. I would have been gone for 3 to 7 days before anyone decided something was wrong. And even then, they would have just known I left on my bike and vanished. I would have been across the border or dead before anybody even knew I was gone. So human traffickers, let's not meet. I was home alone. It was the middle of the summer, and my parents had left for the weekend to go to our house on Cape Cod. It's about a 2-hour drive away, so it's no big deal for them to leave me alone for a few days. My mom had made some pulled pork and pasta for me to heat up and eat whenever, and I had some money if I wanted to order a pizza. Things were all good. The first night I was alone, I stayed up until 3 in the morning playing Xbox, so I woke up really late the next day. I checked my phone when I woke up and saw that it was a little past 1. I'd made plans to play some street hockey with my friends at 3, so I threw myself out of bed and stumbled into the shower. I take really long showers, so when my parents are gone, I go mental. I was there for about 45 minutes on my phone, scrolling through Reddit and Twitter and whatnot, when I heard my front door open. The bathroom is directly up the stairs from the back door, and the thing is pretty loud when it opens and closes. I immediately froze, since obviously I was supposed to be alone. I waited for about 2 minutes, ears trained in, trying to hear anything else. Nothing. I figured it was just the wind, or maybe my parents were home early, so I turned off the shower, wrapped my towel around myself, and slowly walked down the stairs to check it out. So the stairs of the kitchen, where the back door is, are pretty tight and walked in. So it's essentially like walking down a tighter version of this, but replacing the rail with a wall. So I can't see into the kitchen when I walk down. Even though my house is old, and each step on the stairs makes a super loud creak, I still took my time and tried to be as quiet as possible. I probably took 45 seconds walking down all 12 of the stairs. So when I got to the second to last stair, right before I could see around the corner into the kitchen, I take a little breath to compose myself. In my mind, I knew I was being stupid. There obviously wasn't anything in the kitchen, and there's no way I wouldn't have heard another noise, and there's no reason for them to still be in the kitchen, even if there were burglars or something in the house. After sort of mentally chastising myself for being such a wuss, I sort of chuckled to myself for being stupid, and just normally walk the last 2 stairs and turn the corner into the kitchen. Standing about 2 feet away from me in the middle of the kitchen is a man staring straight at me, perfectly still, with a massive smile across his face, just staring at me. The thing I remember most vividly wasn't his face or his smile, but his arms. They weren't just at his side. He held them in the strangest, most abnormal position I'd ever seen. They were where one would normally hold their arms, but he had rotated them to the point where they were almost completely reversed, as well as lifting them up and a little behind himself. I don't know why I remember this so much, but it's just the most demonic, abnormal position I've ever seen. Honest to God, I think I almost had a heart attack right there. Looking back, I can realize how creepy the situation was. but in the moment I just took a step towards him and punched him as hard as I could in the jaw, sort of half slapping / pushing him towards the ground. The second I connected, I beelined up the stairs, dropping my towel in the kitchen with my heart beating out of control. I sprinted into my room and locked my door behind me. I quickly put a chair up against the doorknob like you see in TV. Almost without thinking, I immediately called 911 and nearly in tears told the operator what happened. As I sat on the floor of my room, in practically the fetal position, staring at the door, praying that a cop would be here soon, I noticed the light coming from the gap between my door had stopped. He was standing outside of my door. There are no words to describe the feeling I had. I was paralyzed with fear, watching the shadow across the bottom of the door shift in tiny ways. I stayed balled up, staring at the gap, praying the man would go away for what seemed like an hour. All the while, the 911 operator was asking, "Hello, sir? Are you there? Hello?" I didn't want to make a noise, and even if I wanted to move my arms to bring the phone to my mouth, I don't think I could have. Eventually the light returned to the gap, and I heard the faintest footsteps, slowly creaking the wooden floorboards as he walked down the hall. It was silent for minutes as I just sat there curled up, unable to even speak. I heard banging on the front door and the sound of 2 officers entering my house. I finally felt safe, and I opened the door to the 2 of them standing there, and I almost cried. Nowadays, my parents don't leave me alone anymore. Thank God. I check every lock on the house before going to bed. I still get nightmares occasionally, and my heart starts racing whenever I see someone standing still, but I'm doing alright. Even working with sketch artists and a few lineups, the police never found whoever was in my house. This sends shivers down my spine every time I look outside, half expecting to see him standing across the street smiling under a lamppost. I have no idea what he wanted or who he was, but regardless, let's not meet. Ever again. He smells like garbage. He knows where I sleep. He wants to eat me. This one's wild. This is going to be long, but it's worth it. But just in case. TLDR. Crazy customer gets possessive. Over a year later, he hunts down my sister and finds out where I live. Police find him dead in his car, full of written intentions to eat me, piece by piece, while I watch. I was working at a sports bar in the morning, and a big dirty fella sat down in my section. He had shoulder-length wild hair and dirty torn clothing. Typical loony garb. But I'm a good waitress. I don't plan on treating him any differently than any other customer, so I greet him, and I'm instantly hit with the smell of garbage. I grew up neglected and abused, which is important for a few reasons, some of which come into play later. 1. I know what it's like to be judged, and I empathize and overcompensate when I deal with someone who I think has also been wrongfully judged. 2. My parents were creepy hoarders, so the smell of garbage and BO together especially, gives me anxiety attacks. 3. Because of the abuse and some other trauma, I have severe PTSD. The sports bar was the last job I was able to hold, which means I'm always on high alert and hypersensitive to my surroundings and possible threats. I think in terms of defense always, especially concerning my home. So even though the smell of this man was skyrocketing my anxiety, I treated him well. I figure he was down on his luck. He came in on all-you-can-eat taco bar day and stayed for 5 hours, so I figured he hadn't eaten much lately, which struck a personal chord with me because our parents didn't feed us and we often went days without food. I felt so sorry for him, so I went above and beyond with serving him. He obviously appreciated it, and he left. Nothing unusual. He returned the next week and requested me. This time he had brought some emails he printed out between him and his ex, and asked me if I could read them and then explain some of the things his ex said since I was a girl. I told him I would read it when I wasn't working, which I had no intention of doing, and I took them and shoved them in my purse. From the emails I could see that his name was Steve. He later asked what days and shifts I worked, and I lied through my teeth. He started asking other personal questions too. I'm used to this. I've waited tables for 8 years, and at this point I've dealt with a fair bit of creepers. So I have a whole fabricated life story on deck designed to deter any funny business. Stuff like my boyfriend was a giant with anger issues, I have nosy neighbors, etc. I remember that the only true thing I ever told him was that my sister worked at Subway, and I accidentally mentioned her name. I remember vividly because I had a very strong gut feeling that I shouldn't say it. I wish I had listened to that feeling. A week later, during one of my night shifts, Steve came in, and he was pissed. He demanded to know why I wasn't working when I said I was. I said I had traded a lot of shifts recently. Steve got super close to me and exclaimed that I better be here next time, and he left. A cook told me he had seen that guy sleeping in his car in the parking lot that morning, and he had seen the same car parked in the lot several times when he left at night. He knows it was the same car because it was filled with trash. Steve came back in after last call and told me he wanted to place an order, but I said it was too late, so he went to the bathroom. I watched for him to leave, and he never did. At this point, I have a panic attack building. I tell the bartender and manager what's going on, and him and the bouncer find him standing on the toilet in the stall. They drag him out and tell him he can never come back. I told my boyfriend, so when he picked me up, he brought 2 friends, and I discreetly hide my face and disguise myself when I left, checking the mirrors to see if we were being followed. Steve never came back, and I ended up quitting shortly after anyway. Eventually, my boyfriend and I broke up, and I kept our apartment and had my sister move in. A few months later, things took a turn for the worst. I started dating my girlfriend, who was from a small town, and she wanted to take a weekend trip back home. When we got back, one of the window panes was busted in a multiple paned window. I asked my sister about it, and she said she hadn't noticed. She hadn't left the house all weekend, and she didn't hear glass breaking or anything else suspicious. This did not feel like a break-in attempt, and the more we thought about it, the scarier it became. 1, we were dead broke. There's nothing you could get any money from inside. Trust me, I've tried. And that's evident no matter what window you look in from. Like I said, I think defense. So all the windows have blinds, but there are a few gaps in them from the cats. I've looked through these gaps multiple times to be completely aware of what can and cannot be seen. Also, I put long screws in all the window frames so they can't be opened more than 4 to 6 inches. 2, the window pane was pried out, not busted in, meaning they knew someone was home and they didn't want to be heard. 3, it was the only night in over a year that I had left town. I didn't put it on Facebook and only told a few good friends. Neither my sister nor I have cars, so you can't look in the driveway and see who's home. The next night, we heard the neighbor's dogs barking and growling, and we heard footsteps in the yard. I grabbed the gun. I went to the living room next to the yard and listened, thinking to myself, be smart. Is this 2 feet or 4? And the second I realized it was bipedal, I started flipping the lights on and off rhythmically to make the person think we were signaling our neighbor. That made them leave. Sign 4, it wasn't a break-in attempt. You don't return to the house you failed to break into the day before. My sister and I got tasers and wasp spray. It's cheaper than pepper spray and it sprays further. Because I don't have a CNC and my sister won't touch a gun. The rest of the week was quiet and my sister was now armed. So that weekend my girlfriend and I decided to go out. We got in a stupid fight that night, and when she dropped me off I threw $20 in her car and said something snarky, like, here's my half of the tab, and went inside. She noticed when she was a few blocks away and texted she was going to come give it back, but I told her not to. She knocked, but I didn't answer because I was mad. I heard footsteps come up to my bedroom window and I waited for her to knock on the window so I could yell and tell her to not come. But she just walked off. She texted to say she took the $20 in the screen door, so I got up to grab it, and there was nothing there. I told her it wasn't there and asked if it could have fallen out, and it wasn't possible. Then I asked why she walked to my window, and she said she hadn't. This meant whoever saw her leave the money had to be 50 feet or less from the door. It had only been 3 minutes tops from when she dropped it off to when I checked, and the only place that it could have been was our backyard. It also means whoever walked up to my window knew my girlfriend was there to see me and knew which room was mine. A week later, we heard footsteps in the yard again. I did the same routine, grabbed the gun, stood in the living room, started with the lights. Then I had an idea. This person needs to think that they can be seen. So I started to flip the switch every time I heard a step. Once they noticed, they started running. So I ran to look out the peephole to see a big fella with wild hair running down the alley. Even though I didn't get a great look, the general outline looked like Steve. So I started looking for the emails he gave me. Like I said, I'm always on high alert, and he raised concern. The second I noticed his full name was on the emails, I decided I was going to keep them. I get his last name and searched his public record. Then I pulled up his most recent mugshot and asked my sister if she had seen the man before, and her face went ghost white. She said yes. He smelled like garbage, and that made her anxious too. He came into her job a few times. But every time he came in, he asked her lots of questions. She said she'll never forget the creepy, menacing smile he plastered on his face the second she told him her name, and the feeling of pure fear it gave her. She rides her bike to and from work, so I'm betting he followed her home. One thing became painfully clear. He didn't hurt my girlfriend when she left the money. He didn't touch my sister when she rode her bike home. This was about me. The second she told me this, I called the cops. I gave them the emails, and I told them everything I knew down to the name of the cook I knew could describe his car. They found his car within weeks. It was abandoned by the lake. It was full of trash, a few personal belongings, and pages on pages of his crazy thoughts and intentions. There were hundreds of pages about me and what he thought he knew about me, my sister, and a checklist of all of the subways he checked to find her, what he learned from her, the layout of our home, my girlfriend's info, and the most messed up, his very sexually charged plan to keep me alive while he cut me up and ate me. The plan was to break in, kill my sister, and wait for me to come home. Then he was going to cut off a piece of me a day and make me watch while he ate it and touched himself. In less than 24 hours, the cops found his body in the lake.